The Dominion of Vale had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years. It was a vast, sprawling empire of ancient races, its dominion upheld by a rigid hierarchy, where humanity was nothing more than a distant footnote, a species deemed unworthy of notice. When the Dominion's agents first arrived in Seoul, they did not come with warships. They came with diplomacy, veiled threats, and economic shackles. Humanity was to be leashed before it could ever pose a problem. The Dominion had done this 1,000 times before, subtly, methodically, and without failure. But humans were unlike anything they had conquered before. The United Terran Directorate, UTD, Earth's first true global government, saw through the deception. What began as a silent economic war quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. A coordinated cyber attack crippled Earth's financial markets, followed by a manufactured energy crisis, then the quiet assassinations of key human leaders. But the final insult came in the form of the mandate of compliance, an ultimatum from the Dominion, declaring Earth a protectorate of Vale. Humanity would be allowed to govern itself, but only under strict Dominion oversight. Resistance was futile. Submission was logical. The Dominion never anticipated what happened next. The UTD did not negotiate. There was no drawn-out diplomatic process, no frantic attempts at compromise. Humanity had spent centuries warring amongst itself, and it had learned one undeniable truth. Power was never given, it was taken. The response came in the form of a single transmission broadcast across every Dominion channel. We do not kneel. Then, the counterstrike began. Terran cyber warfare units infiltrated Dominion networks, triggering system-wide blackouts across their forward bases. The UTD's hidden orbital defense platforms, dismissed as primitive, activated in unison, launching precision railgun volleys that shredded the Dominion's enforcement fleet above Earth. The attack was so sudden, so flawlessly executed, that the Dominion's commanders barely had time to react before their forces were in full retreat. But humanity did not allow them to escape unscathed. Experimental Terran warships, built in secret, surged forward with weapons that defied expectation. Kinetic impact cannons, EMP lances, and missile swarms that tore through Dominion hulls like paper. The once invincible armada that had arrived to subjugate Earth was shattered. Survivors fled, their transmissions filled with panicked warnings. The humans are not weak. The humans are not afraid. The humans are coming. The first battle of the war was over. Humanity had won. But the UTT knew the Dominion would not accept humiliation. There would be no peace talks, no opportunities for surrender. This was an empire that had never been challenged, and it would respond with overwhelming force. So, humanity did what it had always done best. It prepared for war. The Black Crusade had begun. The Dominion of Vale had never known true fear. Its fleets had crushed countless civilizations before they could ever dream of resistance. Its rulers, the High Lords, viewed war as a game of maneuvering and slow, inevitable subjugation. But now, for the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion felt something alien, dread. Humanity did not wait. The United Terran Directorate, UTD, knew that if it fought defensively, the Dominion's overwhelming numbers would eventually crush Earth. The only path forward was total war. And so, the first target was chosen, Andar Prime. A key Dominion stronghold, Andar Prime was a logistical hub, a fortress world that served as the beating heart of the Dominion's supply lines. Destroying it would send a message, not just to the Dominion, but to the entire galaxy. The fleet assembled in silence, hundreds of warships, once experimental, now forged in the crucible of war, prepared to strike. The Erebus Doctrine was enacted, a strategy of overwhelming first-strike devastation. No warnings, no mercy. When the UTT fleet arrived in the Andar system, the Dominion commanders reacted with amusement. Humanity's ships were smaller, their numbers inferior. The High Lord of Andar, an ancient being who had crushed more rebellions than he could count, smirked as he gave a single order. Erase them. But the moment the Dominion moved to engage, their defenses crumbled. Terran warships did not fight like Dominion vessels. They did not adhere to ancient, rigid tactics. They adapted. Dominion sensors were hacked mid-battle, rendering enemy ships blind as human railguns treaded their hulls. Swarms of AI-piloted interceptors weaved through the void, striking where Dominion shields were weakest. Then came the drop. From the darkness of space, thousands of orbital drop pods launched toward Andar Prime's surface. They hit the ground like meteors, releasing Terran shock troopers clad in advanced exosuits. Soldiers enhanced with cybernetic augments tore through Dominion defenders in brutal close combat. The High Lord's palace was the final target. His guards, elites who had never lost a battle, made their stand. But against humanity's fury, they were nothing. The High Lord himself, once a god in his own eyes, was dragged before Terran commanders, his golden robes soaked in blood. "This is impossible," he choked, staring at the human soldiers surrounding him. "You were supposed to be primitives. You were supposed to die." The Terran commander, expression cold as steel, simply replied, "We don't die easy." With a single shot, the High Lord's reign ended. The Dominion survivors were allowed to flee, not out of mercy, but to spread the message. Andar Prime burned, its skies blackened by war. The First World had fallen. The Black Crusade had begun in earnest. The fall of Andar Prime sent shockwaves through the Dominion. What should have been a routine suppression had turned into an unthinkable disaster. The High Lords of Vale, rulers of the Dominion, could no longer deny the truth. Humanity was not just resisting. They were winning. Panic spread through the aristocratic circles of the Dominion's core worlds. But where the High Lords were paralyzed by fear, the Butcher Lords saw opportunity. The Butcher Lords, powerful Dominion warlords who thrived on bloodshed, had carved their names into history through brutality. Their fleets were not bound by the slow-moving bureaucracy of the Dominion's main forces. Their armies did not adhere to the rigid traditions of the High Lords. They were conquerors, executioners, and enforcers of Dominion rule. And now, they were humanity's next problem. Gathering at the war moons of Rixos, the Butcher Lords assembled a force unlike any humanity had faced. Over 1,000 warships, backed by entire legions of genetically modified shock troopers, battle beasts, and mercenary hordes. They did not come to pacify. They came to exterminate. Their leader, Grand Warlord Tarak Hale, grinned as he gazed upon his fleet. "These creatures think they know war." He sneered, his jagged fangs gleaming. "Let us show them what war truly is." And so, the Butcher Lords marched for humanity's destruction. The Battle of Duranus Rift. The UTT had anticipated a counterattack, but not one of this scale. When Dominion fleets had engaged before, they had fought defensively, retreating when losses mounted. But the Butcher Lords did not retreat. They tore into the first human fleet they encountered near Duranus Rift, unleashing firepower that turned entire planets into lifeless husks. For the first time since the war began, humanity faced the real fury of the Dominion. The battle raged for days, with Terran forces struggling to match the sheer numbers of the enemy. For every Dominion battleship destroyed, 3 more emerged from the void. Mercenary raiders struck deep behind human lines, sabotaging supply chains and ambushing reinforcements. Humanity was being pushed back. Until the UTD activated Project Revenant, the counterstrike. The Revenant Initiative had been humanity's greatest gamble, an experimental force of fully cybernetic soldiers, their minds fused with AI battle processors. They did not feel fear. They did not hesitate. When the Dominion forces pushed forward, the Revenants arrived. Drop pods rained from the sky like burning stars, releasing soldiers who did not die, who did not break, who fought even with limbs missing. Warlord Sarek Kale, watching from his command ship, felt something he had never known before: terror. His war beasts were torn apart by humans who moved faster than any organic being should. His best soldiers were butchered by enemies who fought without pain, without mercy. The Butcher Lords, once the terror of the galaxy, were now the hunted. In a single night, the tide of battle turned. The UTD's forces, reinforced by the Revenants, cut through the enemy like a scythe. Kale attempted to flee. He never made it. His fleet, once invincible, was reduced to smoldering wrecks drifting in the void. His corpse, along with those of the Butcher Lords, was broadcast across the Dominion. The message was clear. Humanity would not be stopped. The Butcher Lords' last gamble had failed, and the Black Crusade marched on. The Butcher Lords were dead, their fleets shattered, their legions burned to ash. The Dominion had exhausted its most ruthless enforcers, and still, humanity did not stop. The United Terran Directorate, UTD, saw the opening and pressed forward with brutal efficiency. Their next target, Karos. A fortress world like no other, Karos was the Dominion's military stronghold, its bulwark against external threats, its impenetrable shield. It had stood undefeated for over 6,000 years, repelling invasions, quelling rebellions, and standing as a monument to Dominion supremacy. The Dominion strategists were certain that Karos would break the human advance. They were wrong. The beginning of the end. When the UTT fleet arrived, Karos's commanders scoffed. The planet's orbital defenses were unmatched. Thousands of automated turrets, a fleet of warships larger than any humanity had faced before, and planetary shields strong enough to withstand doomsday weapons. The Dominion believed in overwhelming defense. Humanity believed in obliteration. The UTT launched Operation Hammerfall. On the first day, orbital kinetic bombardments rained down, targeting power plants, communication hubs, and key infrastructure. Dominion forces scrambled, but humanity's electronic warfare crippled their response. On the second day, cybernetic infiltration teams hacked into Karos's defense grid, shutting down key systems. The Dominion fleet, once a wall of steel, found itself fighting blind, its coordination unraveling under relentless electronic attacks. On the third day, the landings began. Terran exo-titans, towering machines of war, descended onto the battlefield, turning entire Dominion battalions into rubble. Genetically enhanced Void Marines led the charge, their armor absorbing energy blasts that should have incinerated them. Karos's defenders fought desperately, deploying bioweapons, war beasts, and last-ditch doomsday devices. But nothing could stop the Black Crusade. On the fourth day, the UTT launched a final, decisive assault. Millions of Terran soldiers stormed the capital, cutting through the last remnants of Dominion resistance. Cities burned, towers crumbled, the sky itself blackened with smoke. In the end, Karos's ruler, Supreme Lord Varix, stood in the ruins of his once great palace, surrounded by the dead. He activated his emergency beacon, transmitting a desperate plea to the Dominion core worlds. Karos is lost. The humans are. A railgun round took his head before he could finish. The aftermath. The fall of Karos sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Dominion's strongest fortress, once thought unbreakable, had been reduced to ruins in 6 days. The UTT did not leave survivors. Karos was not just conquered, it was erased. The message was clear. No world was safe. No empire was untouchable. As the dust settled, the Black Crusade prepared for its next target. The Dominion was dying, and humanity had only just begun. The Dominion of Vale was crumbling. Andar Prime was a graveyard. The Butcher Lords were dead, and Karos, their mighty fortress world, had been erased. Humanity did not slow. The Black Crusade was no longer just a war of survival. It was a war of annihilation. And now, the path led to the heart of the Dominion. Val-Zur, the Golden Throne. The capital world of the Dominion, Val-Zur, had stood untouched for 10,000 years. It was the seat of power, the jewel of the Empire, a world of towering spires and endless luxury. Billions lived under its golden domes, basking in the wealth stolen from 1,000 conquered worlds. It had never known war. Until now. The spear that struck the heart. The High Lords of Vale, once distant figures who dictated the fates of lesser races, were now frantic with fear. Their fleets were in disarray, their armies shattered. The defenses of Vale Zur, while formidable, were untested, unproven. But the UTD did not attack like the Dominion expected. They did not arrive in waves. They struck like a dagger in the dark. Using experimental phase cloak technology, a single Terran strike force breached the Dominion's sensor net and descended upon Vale Zur like wraiths. Thousands of drop pods, loaded with revenants, void marines, and AI-controlled war machines, fell from the sky like a storm of burning meteors. The Dominion's elite guard, warriors who had never fought a real battle, rushed to defend their High Lords. They were torn apart. In the streets of Vale Zur, humanity's fury was unleashed. Skyscrapers collapsed in fire and ruin. Domed palaces were torn open, their silken halls soaked in blood. The High Lords, desperate to escape, fled to their grand citadel, the Golden Spire. They believed they could wait out the storm behind walls of diamond and steel. They were wrong. The end of an empire. The UTT had no intention of conquering Vale Zur. They came to destroy it. Revenants stormed the Golden Spire, cutting through the Dominion's last defenders with terrifying efficiency. The High Lords, gods in their own eyes, fell screaming as they were dragged from their thrones. Their final moments were broadcast across every Dominion world. The same rulers who had once dictated the fates of entire species now knelt before humanity, trembling. The Terran commander, his face hidden behind an armored visor, gave them no speech, no last words. Just a single command: burn it. The UTT unleashed their final weapon, the Crucible Bomb, a superweapon designed not just to destroy a city, but to turn an entire planet's surface into molten glass. As the Terran fleet withdrew, Vale Zur burned. The Dominion's capital, its heart, its soul, was gone. The empire that had once ruled the stars had no ruler, no throne, no homeworld. And the Black Crusade marched on. Vale Zur was gone. The Golden Throne had been reduced to molten slag, and the High Lords of the Dominion were nothing but ashes. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion had no ruler. Across the galaxy, Dominion-controlled worlds fell into chaos. Without central authority, military governors, warlords, and ambitious noble houses turned on each other, each vying for control over the shattered empire. Some declared themselves the rightful rulers. Others fled, seeking refuge in distant star systems. Entire fleets broke apart as rival admirals fought for dominance, while planetary governors shut their gates, hoping to weather the storm. But there was no hiding from what came next. Humanity was still coming. Divide and exterminate. The UTD, knowing the Dominion's military strength was still vast, enacted the Divide and Exterminate directive. The strategy was simple: turn the Dominion against itself. Terran cyber warfare units infiltrated Dominion communication networks, falsifying battle orders, spreading false intelligence, and igniting paranoia. Some Dominion warlords found themselves ambushed by their own allies. Others turned their fleets against rival factions, believing they were about to be betrayed. The Dominion collapsed in on itself. While the alien warlords tore each other apart, humanity struck. UTT fleets launched precision strikes on key strongholds, crushing any Dominion force that still posed a serious threat. Planetary bombardments shattered industrial centers, cutting off supply lines. Terran forces infiltrated Dominion strongholds, assassinating warlords and governors before they could consolidate power. The Dominion's former slaves, races who had suffered under Val's rule, rose up in rebellion. Armed with Terran-supplied weapons and training, they joined the Black Crusade, eager for revenge. World after world fell, not in grand battles, but in sudden, brutal purges. This was not conquest. This was extermination. The last war council. On a dying world, deep in the Dominion's former heartland, the last surviving warlords gathered in desperation. 12 alien leaders, each once a ruler of millions, now reduced to fugitives. The air was thick with tension. Paranoia clawed at their minds. None knew if they were the last remnants of the Dominion, or if they were about to die at the hands of their own kind. One of them, an elder strategist named Vartok, spoke with grim finality. "We cannot defeat them. Humanity is not here to conquer. They are here to erase us." Silence. Then another warlord, his voice shaking, asked the unthinkable. "Should we surrender?" A bitter laugh echoed through the chamber. Surrender? To a species that had already proven it would accept nothing less than total destruction. No, there would be no surrender. If the Dominion was to die, it would take as many humans with it as possible. The warlords swore a final oath. They would make their last stand, not for victory, but for vengeance. The last embers of the Dominion gathered their remaining fleets, and the Black Crusade prepared for the final battle. The Dominion was dead. Its homeworld was glass, its leaders were ash, and its once mighty fleets were wreckage drifting through the void. But still, some refused to accept extinction. The last of the Dominion's warlords had gathered at Orcs, an ancient fortress world on the Empire's fringes. Once a minor outpost, it had become the final refuge of the Dominion's shattered armies. A coalition of warlords, broken admirals, and what remained of their fleets had come together for one last desperate stand. They had nothing left to fight for. No empire, no future, no hope. Only vengeance. The unbreakable wall. Orcs had been transformed into a fortress of nightmares. Thousands of planetary cannons, orbital battle stations, and shield generators created an impenetrable bulwark. The last Dominion fleet, 500 warships, their hulls scarred from endless retreat, formed the last line of defense. The warlords knew they couldn't win, but they could make humanity bleed. The Terran onslaught. The UTT arrived in force. Over 1,000 warships, dreadnoughts bristling with firepower, AI-controlled destroyers calculating every maneuver with inhuman precision. A human commander's voice echoed across the battlefield, his message broadcast to every Dominion warlord. "This is your last chance. Die fighting or die surrendering. Either way, you die." The warlords chose to fight. The battle began with a storm of firepower. The Dominion's planetary defenses roared to life, tearing through the first wave of Terran warships. Hundreds of human vessels burned in the void. But humanity did not falter. The second wave deployed hunter-killer drones, overwhelming the Dominion's automated defenses. The third wave unleashed planetary siege weapons, cracking the crust of Orcs, sending shockwaves through the fortress cities below. Then came the ground assault. A war without mercy. Humanity's revenants and void marines descended from orbit, breaking through the remaining surface defenses. Bioengineered Dominion, shock troops, savage and mindless, threw themselves at the human invaders. They were ripped apart. The streets of Orcs ran red with Dominion blood. The air was thick with the scent of burned flesh and melted steel. In the end, the warlords fought to the last man. Vartok, the last great Dominion strategist, stood atop the ruins of his command center, watching his empire collapse around him. As the final Terran troops stormed his position, he let out a slow, rattling breath. "They were right," he muttered. "We should have burned them when we had the chance." A Terran officer raised his rifle. One final shot. The last warlord fell. The end of the Dominion. Orcs was reduced to nothing but smoldering ruins. The last remnants of the Dominion had been purged. The war was over, but the Black Crusade was not. Humanity now stood alone in a broken galaxy, and they would decide what came next. The war was over. Orcs had been reduced to a wasteland of shattered metal and charred corpses. The last Dominion warlords were dead, their fleets annihilated, their armies buried beneath the rubble of their own fortresses. Humanity had done the impossible. The oldest empire in the galaxy, the Dominion of Vale, had been erased. Across the void, once enslaved worlds gazed upon the wreckage of their former masters with stunned disbelief. Some rejoiced, some trembled in fear. Because now, there was a new question, one whispered across 1,000 systems. What would humanity do next? The silence before the storm. For the first time in history, humanity held absolute power. There was no empire strong enough to challenge them. No fleets remained to stand against them. The United Terran Directorate's War Council convened aboard the dreadnought Eclipse Prime, orbiting the ruins of Val-Zur. The greatest military minds of Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies gathered, their armor still stained with the blood of their fallen enemies. A choice lay before them. Some advocated for restraint. Humanity had proven its might. There was no need to go further. Let the former slaves of the Dominion rebuild and allow the galaxy to recover. Others, the true architects of the Black Crusade, saw things differently. Admiral Vasquez, the mastermind of the Dominion's fall, leaned forward. "We have burned one empire," he said. "Now we build another." The ultimatum. Across the remains of the Dominion, UTT warships arrived in orbit over every major world. Armored legions, the same ones that had torn through the Dominion, stood ready to enforce humanity's will. A single transmission was broadcast across the galaxy. It was not a request. It was not a plea. It was a demand. Kneel or burn. Some worlds, too broken and afraid to resist, swore fealty immediately. Others, former slave races who had suffered under the Dominion's rule, saw this as their chance at freedom. They refused. They believed humanity would show them mercy. They were wrong. The final purge. The Black Crusade did not stop. It simply changed targets. Rebellious systems that refused to bend were wiped from existence. Terran war fleets descended upon worlds that defied them, leaving nothing but scorched ruins and the silent echoes of civilizations that once were. Soon, no one resisted. The galaxy belonged to humanity. The New Age. With the Dominion's ashes still smoldering, the United Terran Directorate rebranded itself as the Terran Imperium. The Black Crusade was no longer just a war. It was the foundation of an empire. From Earth to the farthest reaches of the void, one truth became undeniable. Humanity was no longer just another species. They were the masters of the stars, and there was no one left to challenge them.